What's up, guys? This is Joshua Overby bringing you a slightly belated but still relevant, at least in my opinion, quick recap and review of this past Sunday's WWE pay-per-view TLC 2014, or TLCS as they've been wanting to call it for the last couple of weeks, standing for tables, ladders, chairs, and stairs. And let me just preface this entire review by saying when it comes to the wrestling fan community, I don't really consider myself somebody that's very hard to please. Essentially, as long as the booking is solid, you're telling a good story, I can live with things going not exactly the way I'd want them to or the way I'd see it. I like to always give wrestling promotions the benefit of the doubt, to say that they have the insider perspective, they know what they're doing in the long run. All I really want to have happen at the end of a show is just to be entertained. And that's really the problem that we run into with TLC this year around is the WWE essentially, at least in my opinion, failed to entertain in almost every conceivable way. Essentially, to put it into perspective, if we're looking at the main card of the night, there were 8 matches, 9 if you include the pre-show bout. And of those 8 matches on the main card, only 2 were really worth seeing. So we're already looking at about a 25% success rate. But even with those 2 good matches, and they are good matches, I would definitely recommend that if you haven't seen them, you go out and see them. I'll explain what they were in a minute. Even they, in my opinion, had some problems with them that kept them from being completely enjoyable or completely solid 5-star matches, even though they are certainly worth seeing. So let's jump into it a little bit. And first of all, I'll just talk about what was really lacking with the pay-per-view, and that is really the other 75% of the main card. For the most part, a lot of these matches were either sort of saddled with ridiculous gimmick stipulations, such as the chairs match between Ryback and Kane, and then the stairs match between Big Show and Eric Rowan. I have a problem with this kind of match stipulation anyway. I mean, what exactly... I know we've seen chairs matches, so I know what they are, but what makes it any different from a no disqualification match, really? I mean, all they're really telling you is that stairs are legal, and I guess encouraged to an extent. After all, that is the name of the match. But how is that any different from a no disqualification match? Or is it some sort of weird stipulation we don't know about because it hasn't been tested, where you can use chairs, but the minute that Mr. Fuji runs out of retirement and hands me a bag of salt and I throw it in somebody's eyes and all of a sudden I'm disqualified for that? It just doesn't make sense to me. Both of these matches, in my opinion, would have been better as just one-on-one contests where the performers could focus on telling some sort of story in the ring instead of having to tell a little bit of a story and then remember, oh, that's right, this is a chairs match, I need to go work you over with the chair a little bit. It just seemed ridiculous and overly cumbersome, and that's really what drove down some of these matches for me because so many of them were just treading water. They were saddled again with these kind of ludicrous gimmicks, and there were no dynamics to the matches. They just came across very dry, very plodding, and just uneventful. Most of the matches were just really uneventful. They had their spots here and there, to be fair. For example, I liked Big Show's tackle on Eric Rowan through the steel steps outside. That looked kind of nice. Same thing, too, at the ending of the match with a knockout punch to the back of Eric Rowan's head. I thought, that looked kind of brutal and kind of cool, so they had their moments here and there, but overall, these matches were pretty forgettable. And especially since they spent such a large amount of time really putting over the steel steps. They had a video package detailing how much each section of the steps weighs. And really at the end of the night, they spent more time putting over those stairs than they did putting over Seth Rollins. I'm just going to throw that out there. And when you're doing that, you have a major problem. And if they weren't saddled with some sort of gimmick, they were just more or less a throwaway match. Case in point, we have Rusev versus Jack Swagger. And I realize I may be in the minority here, or at least from what I can tell from the people I speak with, but I've actually enjoyed some of the matches in the past between Rusev and Jack Swagger. I mean, is it Stone Cold versus Rock, the second coming? By no means. But they definitely, in my opinion, have put on some pretty entertaining matches and can tell some decent stories here and there. So I was looking forward to the match. But from what I'm looking at right here, the match was 4 minutes and 50 seconds. It was treated very much as a filler match. It started off with Rusev sort of selling the ankle injury, so I thought, okay, there's a little bit of a story to tell here. Really, they just traded off submission holds back and forth for a couple of minutes. Jack Swagger passes out, leading to a Rusev victory. And it just was not a very good United States Championship match. It wasn't a very good match in general, just because they were given less than 5 minutes to work with, and it just came across as a throwaway match. Now, moving on to one of the bigger problems I had with the whole night, aside from just a sort of general lack of activity throughout, we come to the John Cena versus Seth Rollins match. And now I'm probably not giving you any new information here. Again, this is a little bit of a belated interview, so you've probably heard all this already. The stipulation, though, is it's a tables match. First person to go through a table loses. Now, this match ran for about 23 minutes and 34 seconds, but there were so many shenanigans and so much tomfoolery this entire match. It was just impossible to keep up with what was going on, essentially. Not that I'll hammer on that too much, because I do come from, not that I come from the Attitude Era, but I was growing up watching wrestling during the Attitude Era, and they were not afraid to really have some crazy convoluted matches here and there, so I don't want you calling me a hypocrite or anything, so I won't really hammer on the match too much, but for that reason anyway. But my biggest problem was just how weak they made Seth Rollins look in this match. Now, I understand he's a heel, so he's going to use underhanded tactics. He's going to be slimy and sneaky and all these things. And if the babyface is on his best game, the heel probably should not be able to beat him. But he should still pose a credible threat. Seth Rollins in this match did not come across as posing any sort of remotely credible threat to John Cena. They made him look out of his league. And he kind of just looked like a buffoon, the way he was running around the ring. He could never build a head of steam. The second he got into trouble, the J&J security squad that's with him would get involved. So it was essentially a 3-on-1 handicap match for most of it. And there was never a point where, despite all the shenanigans, there was never a point where Seth Rollins actually put Cena through a table. The reason I mention that, aside from the obvious that means he would have won, is that Cena put Seth Rollins through, I believe, 3 tables, and the match wasn't called off for various reasons. At one point, the ref was knocked out, and so he didn't see Rollins go through the first table. So essentially, John Cena won the match right there. Then they teased sort of a dusty finish almost, where they both go through a table simultaneously, and the referees can't determine who won. One of the refs thinks that Seth Rollins is the winner, the other thinks Cena's the winner. Eventually the match is restarted. Then we have a Big Show run-in. We have the return of Roman Reigns, who then Superman punches the Big Show and spears him through a table in the corner, setting up their feud going forward. So it was cool to see Roman Reigns return and everything, but again, it was just so much more activity in a match that was so off the wall that it was just kind of hard for me to get behind. And then once again, Rollins gets put through another table, and he just seems so, I just can't hammer on this enough. They just made him seem so out of his league and so weak and so non-credible as a performer and as a competitor for John Cena that I was just really disappointed with this match. I think they, in my opinion, undid a lot of the work that they've been doing to protect Rollins moving forward. Now I understand they tend to do this with Money in the Bank winners to almost make you think they're not too credible, so it makes a cash-in that much more surprising. They also probably want John Cena to look as unstoppable as possible before going into his next match with Lesnar. But on that point as well, I'm really not looking forward to John Cena versus Brock Lesnar, technically part 3 of this series, part 4 if you include going back to Extreme Rules when Brock Lesnar first came back, part 5 if you really want to go back to when John Cena had first started. But I'm just not looking forward to this. If the plan, and all signs sort of point to the plan being Brock Lesnar dropping the title to somebody at WrestleMania, most likely Roman Reigns if things continue on this trajectory, essentially I believe that the company has squandered an opportunity to have some really great Brock Lesnar title defenses against, one match a lot of us want to see is against Randy Orton. If we have Daniel Bryan returning in time for the Royal Rumble or in February, a Daniel Bryan versus Brock Lesnar match would obviously be really good, I believe. Dolph Ziggler, I've heard his name thrown around a good bit, and I know for a fact he could put on a good match with Brock Lesnar. But instead, what we have is a very dominant championship run, but that consists only of Cena matches. Essentially, he's just wrestled Cena ever since winning the title, and I may even take that back. I mean, as far as it being a dominant run, it's dominant in the sense that he hasn't lost it, but they made him look like he was on the verge of defeat at Night of Champions this past year, so who knows how dominant it really is. He's dominant as opposed to everybody else, but I don't know. If they decide Well, it's not even a matter of if they decide. They have decided it's going to be Cena versus Lesnar. It's already all over the billboards. They're promoting this match already. It just seems like a squandered opportunity to me with what they could have done something really special with that title, with Brock Lesnar as the champion. I just think they've really dropped the ball on this. But on a somewhat more optimistic note, the matches I would recommend you checking out are the ladder match featuring Dolph Ziggler and Luke Harper, and the final, or the main event, the TLC match between Bray Wyatt and Dean Ambrose. The Harper-Ziggler match was very good. It led to Ziggler recapturing the WWE Intercontinental Championship. It was a solid 16-minute, 42-second match. Now, it's not quite the be-all, end-all ladder match that in my opinion, that a lot of people are saying it is. It was definitely very good, and it had its great share of spots. I mean, Luke Harper's suicide dive while Dolph Ziggler was holding the ladder looked absolutely brutal. Dolph Ziggler sort of mad dashes for the ladder, the way he would almost use it was almost sort of Looney Tune-ish in a way, the way he would almost use Luke Harper as a kind of stepping stool to try to project himself onto the ladder and try to grab the belt. That looked great. I loved a lot of it, but for me personally, certain parts of the match came across as almost on the reckless side. There came points where it looked like they just weren't working too safely, and maybe that's one reason why some people like this match so much, that it had that air of authenticity to it, that it felt unscripted, that it felt very real and very dangerous, which is what a ladder match is supposed to be. And if that's your reason for liking it, I totally understand. You don't need to sell it to me anymore, because I can see that perspective. For me, though, so much of the match came across as unnecessarily dangerous at times, just as far as the way, particularly Ziggler was taking bumps. Everything just looked kind of like they were flying by the seat of their pants and hoping for the best. And it almost gave the match a kind of reckless, almost sloppy quality at times. And that did detract from the match for me. Also, Luke Harper appeared to injure his arm early in the match. And of course, with wrestling, sometimes it's hard to tell, did he really injure his arm or are we being worked? In either case, though, he's eventually got motion back in it, but I thought that was a missed opportunity a little bit, maybe add just another twist of a storytelling element in there as far as Ziggler working over the arm or showing some sort of weakness in Luke Harper's game. I think they could have capitalized on that, and they didn't, so that detracted from it a little bit for me as well. Maybe they didn't want to focus too intensely on working over a limb since they knew Rusev and Swagger were coming up later in the show, but just from my analysis at the beginning, that's one thing that I thought was a missed opportunity. But again, good match, definitely worth checking out. A great representation of what a ladder match is supposed to be as far as the in-ring action and just the crazy frenetic energy. And the sort of bumps they were taking are basically the abrasions, the cuts, the lacerations. Ziggler gets busted open at one point. Luke Harper gets some cuts on his arm, and it really puts over just sort of how dangerous and unpredictable a ladder match is. So they definitely got that point across. This is definitely one of the matches you should check out. And as for the main event, TLC between Bray Wyatt and Dean Ambrose, for me personally, I know a lot of people are putting the Ziggler match as the match of the night. For me personally, it was Wyatt and Ambrose. I was really impressed with what they did at Survivor Series, and I thought they were going to top it tonight, and they did a very good job, in my opinion. About a 26-minute, 58-second match, and it was kind of everything you want a TLC match to be, but between two people. Ambrose and Wyatt continued their sort of great psychology as far as trying to out-crazy each other. I know I mentioned in my Survivor Series review, one of the things I liked was sort of the putting over their insanity by having them deliver really torturous offense to one another, and this continued in this match. The way they used the Singapore cane, for example. Bray Wyatt at one point sort of secures the Singapore cane in the sleeve that connects the turnbuckle pad to the steel post on the outside of the ring, and basically rams Dean Ambrose's face into the exposed kendo stick or Singapore cane, and that was really brutal looking. That looked great. But then in addition to the storytelling elements, we had sort of the crazy spot fest, the stunt show that TLC is really known for. Dean Ambrose taking crazy bumps off of the ladders, just delivering elbow drops through tables. He took one really nasty one where he delivered an elbow drop off basically the tallest ladder that he could carry to Bray Wyatt through the Spanish announce table. And there was a great sort of comedic moment in there as well. He grabbed what seemed to be the second tallest ladder there was, and some of the fans started booing him because he didn't grab the tallest one. And Dean turns to him with a smile on his face like, I can't carry that one. And so just a little moment of comedy there, good little improv on Dean's part to show why he didn't take the bigger one. But overall, that was a very good match, good storytelling, good spots. The ending was a little weird, to say the least. Basically what we have, you've probably heard about it by now, but in case you haven't, Dean Ambrose is going to hit Bray Wyatt in the face with a TV monitor that he found under the ring. It's still plugged in under the ring to the electrical outlet, and the TV monitor inexplicably explodes in Dean Ambrose's face. It just detonates. Essentially, the way I would put it, being that it is inexplicable, it makes no sense why it would just explode that way. Essentially, the TV monitor turns heel. You know, it's the biggest double cross we've seen in recent times. It brings the Russo swerve to a whole new level, and basically it leads to a Bray Wyatt victory. He slaps on the Sister Abigail real fast, gets the 1, 2, 3, and that's the end of the match after a TV monitor heel turn. I never thought I would say something that ridiculous. But despite the ending of the match and how that was a little bit lackluster, I think they could have gone about it in a couple of different ways. It didn't overshadow how enjoyable that match was for me. I know for some people it has. For some people the finish really did sort of tarnish how great the match was. It definitely keeps me from saying it's a perfect match, but the journey to that point was great. I can't discount, you know, how these guys really did put it all on the line, took some serious risks, and I just thought they did put on a great show that way. So Bray Wyatt versus Dean Ambrose, Dolph Ziggler versus Luke Harper, definitely worth checking out. Pretty much nothing else, unfortunately. So even though I just ended with some optimistic notes, to give you a rating on this pay-per-view, I do have to say from start to finish it was pretty much a gigantic disappointment. Definitely my vote for worst pay-per-view of the year, and I have to give it a 3 out of 10. You know, the matches that were good, they were good, and they bump up that score. I was initially contemplating giving it a 2, but based on those couple of good matches, I can't go any higher than a 3, justifiably. Because as much as I disliked, as a whole, Survivor Series from last month, I was still more entertained by Survivor Series than I was by this year's installment of TLC. But anyway, that's all I've got for this review. So stay tuned. I know I'll bring up a few more reviews in the future. I will be reviewing the New Japan Pro Wrestling Wrestle Kingdom that's airing on January 4th. So we do have that to look forward to, or at least I have it to look forward to. If you can get on pay-per-view, please feel free to do so. New Japan's great promotion, great performers, so definitely check out New Japan if you get a chance. Until then, you know, always feel free to, you know, subscribe to my channel if you want to see any more of these updated wrestling interviews or reviews. Not interviews. I'd like to do some interviews, but we're just doing reviews for now. We'll see what the future brings. So yeah, feel free to subscribe for that. Also, you can check out my blog at jovaverse.blogspot.com. The link to that will be down in the description. You can also follow me on Twitter at JoshuaOverby1 if you're interested in hearing what I have to say, usually when I just tweet randomly during Lucha Underground and things like that. Anyway, I'll see you guys a little bit further down the road. Keep watching wrestling, even though we're sort of at a disappointing stage right now. At the very least, watch Lucha Underground. Lucha Underground is doing great. You won't be disappointed. Watch it on the El Rey Network, and have a blast. See you guys.